What's up, chess fans? So this is a recap video of my fourth round game in the local Westchester tournament. I am starting the game with a rating of just under 2,000. My opponent is rated approximately 1,750. So without further ado, let's jump into the action. So these first few moves have a very interesting name. This is the English opening, and this is the English defense. I think I first heard about this about 20 years ago, and it just had a cool opening sound, so I had to try it. Most of the time, this transposes into some type of Queen's Indian. So we developed our pieces. And I played an early f5 here, the idea being that I want to get control over the e4 square. Typically, it's followed up by knight f6 and usually knight e4. You play d4, e6, knight c6, knight f6, and bishop g3. And here I played bishop e7, which is a normal Queen's Indian type move. But as we'll see, this was actually dubious, and he immediately punished it. So if you want to, you can pause the video and try to figure out what white should play. So white played an excellent move here, d5, which really puts a big cramp in my position. It immediately stops knight e4, because then he can simply trade it off, and this pawn on e4 will be dangling and loose. But more importantly, it actually stops me from developing my queen's knight. Certainly I can't develop it to c6, which is attacked, and it's difficult for me to get it to d7. So in these types of positions, you oftentimes play d6, but that would leave the e-pawn unprotected. And if I were to simply trade off the pawns in here, white has a number of good ideas, but usually a move such like queen c2 would be good, attacking the f-pawn, and also putting pressure on the c-pawn. You could follow it up by bishop f4. Of course, if I defend the f-pawn with a move like g6, then that would allow something like bishop h6. All right, let's go back. So for now, we just castled, and then I had to decide what to do about my my queen knight. One idea that I was looking at was simply playing it to a6 with the goal of getting into c5. But I was worried about knight d4, putting pressure on my e6 pawn, and this looked very tricky line to me. I was expecting maybe we would get into something like this. It wasn't really clear to me how to evaluate it. Well, let's go back. So I didn't go for this right away. I played a funny looking move here, queen c8. Incidentally, the computer thinks I should just admit that the dark square bishop is misplaced and just move it directly to b4, wasting a tempo, with the notion that if I could trade off the bishop for the knight, then I can make room for my knight to go to e4. Now queen c8 accomplishes several things. So first of all, I'm adding defense to the e6 square, so I'm preparing d6, where the e6 square is still protected. I'm also defending my light squared bishop, so in a lot of lines, this knight can move, and in which case he'll be threatening d6 with a double attack on the two bishops. I'm also keeping a watchful eye on the c7 square. So for example, if white starts to harass it with his pieces, we have some defense. Finally, I'm making I'm clearing off the d8 square. Either my bishop or my rook may want to go there in the future. And I thought possibly if he now plays knight d4, which I was looking at, I could counter it with an immediate c5, with the notion that he either needs to move his knight somewhere again, or he can simply trade en passant and allow me to develop my knight without any more issues. Instead, he played an excellent move, a3. The idea being, if I now try to develop my knight to a6 with a goal of getting to c5, he just plays b4. And my knight looks very silly on the rim without any prospects. I can't even move it. If I try to move it back to c7, for example, with a move like c6, when he can just simply come in d6. So let's go back. So here I played a5, which is the engine move. The idea being that it's now stopping b4. So finally, after playing very aggressive chess for the opening, he finally made a somewhat passive move, b3, which I was very happy to see. The engine seems to think the bishop does belong on one of these squares, the f4 or g5 square, which I agree. But it appears that he's going to develop it. He's going to fianchetto both bishops. So finally I got my knight out. He played bishop b2 as expected, and I got my knight to c5 with the goal of now getting my knight to the e4 square and trading some pieces and reducing some of my cramps. So he played a move that was very surprising to me on knight e5. So after being worried about knight d4 for the last 3-4 moves, he ended up playing knight e5. Now, one thing I considered at this point was simply putting my knight in to e4 anyway. And I thought this might lead to a very interesting position. So on one hand, it looks like black has two doubled isolated pawns, but at the same time, this actually opens up a lot of lines for my pieces. Having two bishops in this position should be an advantage for me. I was planning on putting my bishop on c5, for example, and trying to get some pressure on the f file. But it's also very difficult to evaluate. I didn't go for that. I decided to play the move d6, which the engine doesn't like. Now, I was certainly expecting him to put his knight into c6, which is also the engine move. And now here I would have a difficult decision as to which bishop to give up. So I'm going to have to lose one of my bishops. So either I can take it with take his knight with the light squared bishop, or I can allow him to take my dark squared bishop. So if you want, you can pause the video and try to figure out which bishop black should give up. So typically, when making these types of decisions, you should take a look at the pawns. So in this case, we have the majority of my pawns on the dark squares, which would indicate that we should be keeping our light squared bishop, and we should allow him to take my dark squared bishop. However, chess has lots of exceptions. So in this case, the dark squared bishop is absolutely crucial for the defense of the black king. In particular, I wanted to put my dark squared bishop on the long diagonal to counter his bishop that's aiming down on my king side. So I was planning to take this, which the engine agrees with. Now let's go back. But he actually surprised me again. He played knight d3, which the engine doesn't like. Now again, I had considered putting one of my knights into the e4 square, but I didn't like the idea of him maneuvering his knight down to f4, where it put a lot of pressure, or again put pressure on the e6 square. So in the end, I just decided to trade it off and play e5. So at last, now I can breathe a sigh of relief. I've completed my development. I've got rid of my difficult to develop queen's knight, and I was simply planning on just putting my queen off my first rank to connect my rooks and possibly bring my rooks to the center. So I still think white is a little better here because he has extra space, and the engine agrees. I was expecting him to play e4 at this point, with the notion that it would stop me from playing e4. I wasn't planning to take it. I would probably play something like g6 and just continue my development. But he played a surprising move here, f4, which the engine doesn't like. So I responded pretty quickly with e4. And now, so now he's lined up a battery with his bishop and queen, aiming at my king. Now I did want to put my bishop on f6 to counter this whole bishop-queen battery, but it's important not to blunder here. So for example, if I want to move my knight to make space for the bishop, but if, for example, I move it to knight d7, then he can simply take a pawn, and I don't have time to recapture because he's threatening checkmate. Right, so I moved my knight to e8, simply to defend the g7 square, and now I'm ready to play bishop f6. So he played an excellent, very aggressive move again, g4. Now I don't want to take it, because if I take it, then that will open up this for capture, and give him the center. But I also didn't want to play g6 either, because then he could simply play an immediate g5 and prevent the bishop from getting to its f6 square. So it's important to play bishop f6 first, have the queen move, and now I can play g6. So he traded, opening up the g file, and bishop h3. So it may look like the f pawn is pinned, and that he's threatening knight e4 because I cannot recapture back, but of course that would leave his dark square bishop undefended. So I decided it was best to defend the pawn with my knight and also add extra protection to my king, and then swing my queen round to the king side. This is what happened over the next couple moves. But I was thinking at this point about where my king belongs. So one idea is to put it in the corner, similar to him, and then try to get my rooks to the open g file. Another idea was to run my king around to the center of the board, where it would definitely be safer here. Anyway, he played knight d1, which essentially forces the trade of the dark squared bishops on the long diagonal. The engine thinks I should just simply defend my bishop with one of these moves. I ended up just simply trading and getting my rook to the third rank with the notion that it is now ready to go to the g6 square, which would block his rook, especially if he decides to double rooks. Play rook g5. I brought my queen back, and he did double rooks. And I finally got my rook to the g6 square. So he traded and came to queen g3. So now here's where I miscalculated again. I had seen this position from at least a couple of moves ago, and I did play king h7. And it's not obvious why this is a mistake. It would just appear that I'm simply defending my g6 square. Incidentally, the engine thinks I should just simply ignore that on the king side and just start getting counterplay on the queen side with a move like b5, b5 and a4, and hopefully I'll try to win a pawn on the queen side while he worries about winning a pawn on the king side. As we'll see in a minute, my pieces get a little bit tangled. So he played queen h4, knight h5, and rook g5. So now he has a pretty serious threat. His threat is to take the pawn with his bishop on f5, and after I recapture, my knight is undefended. Bishop c8, defending the f-pawn, and now here comes the knight to add an attacker. Now I had seen this, and now I made a second mistake, king h6. So I'd seen this position from several moves ago, and I actually thought that despite the fact that white's pieces looked very well placed, I thought I was actually safe. The idea being that everything is now defended. If he were to take this, and we trade, I now have enough defense to my knight. Both the king and the queen are defending it. My f-pawn is defended, and I'm all ready to get my queen rook to aid into the defense. But this was a miscalculation. So if you want to, you can pause the video now and try to figure out how white can win. So the solution is Ben Feingold will be very impressed with the solution. Solution is to always sack the exchange. And the idea being that once the rook is gone, he has this very nice move, queen g5, after which time he can take it. This is all forced moves, and white will win in this sense. Let's go back. The other idea is to take with a pawn, but it ends up having a very similar effect. White will move his rook from the g5 square, and then queen g5. It leads to a similar combination. So I do think, despite the fact my opponent was around 1750, I think he was definitely strong enough to see this combination. Possibly not several moves ago, but at this point in the game. But he only had a few minutes left on his clock, so he had maybe 5 minutes left. I maybe had 12 or 13 minutes, so time definitely played a factor in this. So he had a miss. He went back with his queen, and I got my last piece into the game, queen rook, with the idea that now that I'm going to add extra protection to the f pawn, and then try to get my queen to the f6 square and start infiltrating his position. And played knight g2 with the goal of getting his knight into the h4 to add to the attack. Queen f6 and knight h4. So at this point, I had my own tactic to make. So if you want to, you can pause the video and try to figure out what black should do this time. So hopefully this is much simpler than the last puzzle. Solution is just simply to take the pawn on f4. And chess.com gives us a brilliant move with 2 exclams, although I don't agree. I think it's relatively easy to spot. The idea being that we are doing 2 things. We're removing the defender of the white rook, as well as giving defense to the g6 square, such that if he now takes if he now were to take the knight, I can simply take his rook. He actually played on one more move. He played queen g3, which was just a blunder, but he's already lost. Now what's interesting is, of course I can just take the rook, but I was looking for a long time at queen a1, with the notion that this is forced, and if he were to take back with the king here, I would simply eat all of his pieces. But of course, white doesn't have to do that. White can just take back with the rook, and this is probably okay. But in this case, after some thought, I just simply took his rook, and he resigned at this point with only a few seconds on his clock. So what are some thoughts? The 3rd game in a row I played in the low 80s, and I came back from a losing position to win. He played 79. So if I expect to win my next couple games, which will be against stronger opponents, I'll definitely have to play better. One thing I am happy with is time management. I think the time control of this tournament is 65 moves, and which is somewhat medium time controls, and you simply have to be careful. A good rule of thumb is to spend approximately a third of your time on the opening, middle game, and ending. And I think I did pretty well with time management. So anyway, I'm heading into the 5th round. I'll be playing a much stronger opponent, probably someone somewhere around expert level. So I hope you're enjoying the recaps, and we will catch you all in the next video.